This heartfelt journey will change your perspective on perfection. Imagine a quiet village at dawn. The air is cool, the earth still holding last night's dark, and a single farmer walks the narrow path between the well and his small home. Across his shoulders rests a wooden pole, and from each end hangs a clay pot. One pot is smooth and whole, its surface gleaming in the soft light. The other is scarred by a long hairline crack that runs from lip to belly, a flaw it carries like a secret. Every morning the farmer fills both pots at the well. Water sloshes gently against clay. For the first part of the walk, both pots feel the same weight, but by the time they return, half of the cracked pot's load has seeped out, leaving it lighter, ashamed. The perfect pot, full and steady, would often speak without thinking, little remarks that sounded like pride more than care. The cracked pot listened and began to measure itself by what it lost. Maybe you felt that way. You count what you drop. You rehearse the insults of a comment. You believe the whisper that you are less because you leak. Day after day, the farmer's route is the same. He never scolds the cracked pot. He hums under his breath and plants a few seeds along the roadside each spring. The cracked pot grows skinnier with water and heavier with shame. The other pot, polished in its usefulness, would sometimes make a hollow joke about worth tied to output. The cracked pot swallowed the laughter and carried a secret ache, until one evening its silence could no longer hold it. "I'm sorry," the cracked pot admitted in a voice that sounded like thin clay rubbing clay. "I cannot hold what I should. I ruined the farmer's work. I am not enough." Tears, if a pot could cry, would be those small gritty drops of clay and salt. It expected a rebuke, a replacement, perhaps a cold dismissal. The farmer stopped walking. Instead of anger, his eyes were gentle. He rested the pole across his knee and placed a hand over the cracked vessel as if it were a sleeping child. "Tomorrow," the farmer said, "walk with me and see." The tone was not patronizing. It was patient, deliberate. The pot, exhausted by shame, went to sleep with a sliver of curiosity, like a new seam mending itself inside. But then something unexpected happened the next afternoon. As they walked home, the cracked pot noticed a ribbon of color along the side of the path where its water fell each day. Tiny buds opened into bright faces, marigolds and little daisies, and a ground cover that spilled like a painted border. They grew only on that side. No flowers on the perfect pot side. No color where the water did not drip. The farmer pointed quietly and said, "I planted those seeds months ago. I knew their roots would need a slow, steady drink. Your leaks were not waste. They were the answer." In that moment, the cracked pot saw itself differently. The water it had once considered lost was the very thing that kept those blossoms alive.
Its flaw, so long a source of shame, had unintentionally made a path of beauty for anyone who walked past. The tears that had once been for guilt turned into something like astonishment, then joy. The pot understood that its measure was not only in what it carried perfectly, but also in what it let go, and in that letting go, created. If this small story feels familiar, pause and think of one crack you carry. Maybe it's a tendency to stumble socially, a past mistake that you replay, a mental health struggle that feels like a leak. Maybe it's a temperament that doesn't fit the polished expectations of the workplace or a relationship. The pot story invites a gentle reframe. What you consider loss might be the source of someone else's bloom. Here are 3 simple, practical ways to begin seeing imperfections as potential gifts. First, notice impact rather than scorekeeping. Stop measuring worth solely by neat results. Ask, who has been warmed or encouraged by my imperfect presence? Often the evidence shows up in surprising, small ways. A friend smiling because you listened. A stranger helped because you were honest. A child learning not to hide their own cracks because you were brave enough to show yours. Second, name one small thing you tend to hide and try a tiny act of generosity with it. If you struggle with impatience, let it fuel compassion for someone overwhelmed. If you felt rejected, let that sensitivity make you available to someone who's hurting. And not promises of rewards, no guarantee of applause, but invitations to experiment with how your vulnerability might serve rather than define you. Third, practice self-compassion as a daily posture, not a one-time fix. When the inner critic begins to tally losses, speak back with something true and kind. I am learning. I am not my mistakes. Small, consistent shifts in how you talk to yourself change which parts of your life you cultivate and which you let erode. This isn't about romanticizing pain or treating suffering as a shortcut to meaning. It's about refusing to let a single visible flaw become the whole story of who you are. The farmer did not celebrate the crack because it was dramatic. He simply saw a possibility that the pot couldn't. Someone who sees you clearly can sometimes help you see yourself anew. And when you begin to look through that lens, your understanding of perfection changes from an impossible standard to a landscape where beauty often springs from unlikely places. So if this changed how you see perfection even a little, consider sharing it with someone who needs that shift. If you're comfortable, leave one word in the comments about a crack that has surprised you or a small blossom you've noticed because of it. Conversation helps us remember that none of us walks a path with leaks, and that sometimes those leaks water the most necessary things.
Walk out of this moment with one thought. Being broken doesn't erase your worth, and being imperfect may open a place for beauty you never intended. May you begin to see your cracks not as failures to hide, but as places where life might quietly, gently grow.